If your business has big goals, you need more than just another vendor. You need a true partner who cares about your deal as much as you do. At PropLogix, we provide time-saving due diligence services from title searches to HOA research, lien searches, and more. Our team will go out of their way to ensure you're supported, and our reports are backed by our Six Sigma quality assurance approach. PropLogix, getting you to the closing table with confidence. A new episode of Title Talks starts now. As a title and real estate professional, you're juggling a lot of responsibilities. It's easy to get lost in the day-to-day and not follow what's going on in the news. But being informed about what's going on in the real estate, mortgage, and settlement industries helps you make better decisions about your business every day. Today, we have a special episode with our friends at HousingWire, an online-based real estate news outlet that's begun to focus more on title-related news in the last several years. We're discussing the topics that are trending right now that you should be following because they impact you and your business. I'm Lindsay Gordon, and this is Title Talks. My guest today is Brooklee Han. She's a journalist and she writes for HousingWire. And we're going to be talking about some of the top stories in the title industry that you need to be following right now. Thank you so much for joining us, Brooklee.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm sure that most people in the title industry are aware of HousingWire and how you guys are covering more and more title-specific industry news. And I'm curious to know a little bit about your background because obviously your byline is on most of the stories that we read in the title industry and HousingWire. So tell me a little bit about your background in journalism and how you came to start writing for HousingWire.
Sure. So, in my previous life, prior to being a journalist, I was an Olympic figure skater. I represented Australia for 9 seasons internationally. And I had gone to school, high school and both university throughout my competitive career and kind of had fallen in love with journalism and the stories that you can tell and the people that you get to speak with through being a journalist. And so I really liked that aspect of journalism, and that drew me into it. From there, I freelanced a bit after graduating from college, doing a lot with sports journalism. Obviously, given my background, that was something that
Yeah.
I really had a passion for, and have had the opportunity to speak to some really incredible athletes from both figure skating and equestrian sports, gymnastics, taekwondo, karate, so all sorts of different sports. And was looking for more of a full-time role and kind of found myself over at HousingWire. And when I had first started at HousingWire, I was basically a real estate reporter, primarily focused on real estate brokerages, real estate agents, the agent experience in the housing market. And within my first couple of weeks that I was at HousingWire, Compass started buying a bunch of title companies. And that was kind of my first exposure to the title insurance industry. And it really piqued my interest and was definitely an area that we weren't covering too much at that time. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of build out the coverage and learn more about the industry over the years.
So how long ago was that you kind of made that pivot?
That was like in late September 2021, so about 2 years ago now almost.
Okay, yeah. So there were a lot of interesting things going on in the industry at that time. So, going from reporting in sports and then, shifting to real estate and then kind of zoning in here, zeroing in more on title, like, how does it differ, do you feel like?
The title industry is obviously a lot smaller than the real estate space that I cover. And because of that, it's a more intimate industry to cover, and I get to speak with a lot, more high level executives, and I find it easier to kind of get a firsthand look at everything that's going on. And I've also found that title, for the most part, people are maybe a little bit more willing to chat than in real estate brokerages. I mean, the brokerage space is so competitive. There are so many high performing brokerages, high performing agents, and there's a lot more real estate agents and real estate brokerages than there are title agents and title companies. So that competitive nature of the real estate space makes it a little bit, people are more reluctant kind of to share their secrets and,
Yeah,
their
yeah.
secrets to success and what has helped them along the way. Whereas title is a little bit more open, and so I like being able to have that kind of look behind the scenes, I guess, if you will, of how the industry operates, and that's been fun, and it's also helped me gain a better understanding of kind of maybe how things work behind the scenes a little bit in the real estate industry as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I've noticed, and I've been working for PropLogix for 8 years now, and like I think everyone that I've ever spoken to outside of our company has always just been really willing to share what they know and like their experience, which is really awesome.
Mhm.
I started the State of the Title Industry report
Mhm.
5 years ago. Well, actually, 6 years ago. This will be our sixth year going into it. And every year it surprises me how many people are like going to take the time to share and like that sort of thing. It's really amazing. I mean, there's definitely competition. I know that there is
Oh, yeah.
competition in this industry, and there's definitely, there's the different underwriters and larger title companies or real estate law firms. But yeah, there's definitely a friendliness and like a, I don't know, camaraderie, I think, amongst different
Yeah,
companies too.
definitely. That's something that's really struck me at both like at Alta One, and I was at NS3 this year compared to some of the NAR conferences. There is that kind of sense of camaraderie and like we're all in this together. Like maybe we're competing against each other for market share or things like that, but we have kind of these same obstacles we have to overcome. So how are we going to get through them together?
Yeah, yeah. I think that comes with being such a highly regulated industry, probably.
Yes.
So, how do you keep a pulse on what's going on? How do you find stories to report on?
So a lot of it is just talking to different people in the industry. I usually get a lot of great content ideas and get to meet with a lot of great sources if I go to, an NS3 or an Alta one and go to these conferences and speak with different people. When it comes to regulatory things, just speaking to some of the different lawyers that I know in the real estate space, as well as people obviously at Alta and other Respro and other kind of organizations within the title industry. When it comes to cybersecurity stuff, I reach out to Certified a lot. They've been a huge help with sourcing different stories and just other contacts I've made along the way so far in the industry. Then of course, earnings reports. Obviously, we're in that season right now,
Yep.
and that kind of helps me get a feel of what's going on, financially for some of these companies. And then, just different reports from Alta, from companies like you all at PropLogix with the State of the Title Industry report. That definitely is an idea or jumping off point for a lot of the stories that I report out kind of in the later half of the year or early, the next year. And just following the industry at large, what's going on in mortgage, what are purchase trends, what's happening in the overall housing market. Speaking to some of our other reporters that do more of the mortgage coverage here at HousingWire and, looking at HELOCs and things like that and different spaces where title is involved because title touches basically
Yes.
almost all transactions, whereas mortgage doesn't. And not every, real estate sale involves a real estate agent as well. So, having different sources in different parts of the market and different parts of the industry, trying to paint that overall picture and see how title is fitting in is kind of a lot of what I do in trying to come up with these stories and, figure out where I want to look into next.
So, how do you determine what stories that you're going to cover in terms of like, do you have an editorial team? Do you guys kind of say, like, whatever has the biggest impact? Like, I mean, I know you're one person and you're working a lot. I can tell you have a lot of stories that you're churning out. So, how do you make those decisions about what gets covered, what doesn't?
Yeah, it's hard. We are a very slim team, but we definitely put out a lot of great content, I think. So it's, you have to make some tough choices from time to time. Like right now, I am been sitting on an idea for a story about the title industry and kind of what's going on with some of these ABAs and joint ventures for like a month and a half now. And I've finally just now like cleared my plate almost just enough where I can kind of dive into that. But it's a lot of, prioritizing and having to pivot and figure out what needs to be done right now and what can kind of wait a little bit. Like obviously right now is earnings season. We're making sure we're covering all the earnings from all of the major mortgage players, real estate brokerages, the big four in title, DOMA, of course, as well, and some of the other publicly traded companies. Yeah, it's a lot of prioritization and meeting with editors and figuring out what we want to cover, how we want to cover it, and figuring out what's an evergreen story, what's an issue that's not going away that we're going to keep
Mhm.
seeing, and what's something that needs to be dealt with right now.
Interest rate hikes are obviously something that we've all been like glued to, paying attention to what the Fed's doing. There's obviously ongoing talks about, recession, title insurance premiums dropping, and companies are downsizing. There's policies from GSEs that are encroaching on the title insurance space. Like, so what right now are you reporting on? What stories do you feel like are ones that title agents that may not be paying attention should really kind of like, sit up and take, note of?
Yeah, one of the big things, obviously the AOLs and everything that's coming down from the GSEs is not going anywhere, but definitely keeping a close tab on kind of what's going on, if something is coming up, what the chatter is about some of these programs and what Fannie and Freddie have, are possibly considering. So I think that's something that everyone needs to be aware of and keep in mind. But the big thing at NS3, and I think moving forward, is we've seen a lot of real estate agents and real estate brokerages right now, looking to increase their margins and just be have a stronger base of support and revenue coming in, especially now that there are so few purchase transactions happening. And so a lot of them are looking at, getting into the title space and forming joint ventures or having affiliated business agreements. And, this is a lot of state regulators have taken notice of this. And, it has been a while since we've had any RESPA actions
Mm-hmm.
in the title industry, but the state regulators are definitely taking notice of some of these trends. And so, making sure that, if you are part of one of these agreements, are you crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's? Is everything up to par and, above board? So I think that's definitely a big concern in the title industry, and something that I want to dive into a little bit more to find out what exactly is happening, what is being scrutinized, and how can title companies make sure that they're all okay and taken care of if they are part of one of these agreements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I can recall as I was starting to understand the landscape of like how different companies are organized and how, some are owned by underwriters and then some are owned by huge, real estate brokerages that have title divisions. Like
Mhm,
it didn't, I think it's tough to understand and to like really get a good grasp of if you're coming from outside the industry, and how things are sort of laid out and how the different ways that you can organize as an organization, and then learning about RESPA and thinking, oh, okay, so how does that work, exactly how does that play into like following the
mhm,
rules and the regulations, and still being this company that's able to potentially, keep everything in house, and we've seen things, certain companies like really large lending companies that are in the title space that might have really backed off recently, or maybe they were, really big into the doing the transactions for refinances, and obviously that kind of, made everyone have to scale back quite a bit. But yeah, I think that that's really interesting, because you're right, there hasn't been a lot of regulatory action in a while.
Yeah, everyone's kind of waiting for something to happen, and right now it looks like it's coming from or will potentially come from state regulators. But yeah, RESPA, I did a story on RESPA about, I don't know, 15 months ago or so, and it was really interesting to learn more about some of the previous actions and just looking at it from a real estate perspective, as you know, from the real estate agent side of things, how much gray area there is
Mm.
surrounding this. And it's a lot of agents find it very frustrating, and title companies also find it frustrating. So it can be challenging to navigate for sure.
Yeah, I know. I definitely, we hear that come up a lot because we'll do, obviously we're a vendor in the space and we help with different services and like title production, but we do a lot of education around like marketing and sales are huge things that title companies, generally like small to mid-size, are always looking for more information on, like how do I capture more market share? How do I stand apart from the competition, and they're just like so hyper aware of these, regulations and staying under that like $25 or $5 or depending on where they are. Certain
Mhm.
states have even higher or lower thresholds in terms of like how much you can spend. But
Mhm.
yeah, they're just like hyper aware of that. And I can imagine feeling like, okay, I'm out here, I'm sweating, I'm trying to figure out how to bring in more business. And then there's this huge company with all of this capital, all of, these resources. And how am I supposed to compete against that?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been interesting talking to some of the smaller title companies. I remember talking to one about a year ago. I think it was called Celebration Title,
Mm-hmm.
and how, one of the ways that they're trying to set themselves apart is, they have these like a confetti cannon and all these different things at closings to really make it into a celebration. And it's been very positive for them. And so it's been fun to see how different title companies are trying to kind of create their own brand and set themselves apart from a lot of the other vendors or a lot of the other title companies in the space.
Yeah, and a lot of what we examine in like the state of the industry is like that duality of like, okay, we have to be fun and we have to like market ourselves and we have to like worry about our brand and we have to like, impress people. And then we also have to like actually do the title work. And it's like, it's a lot, I think, for people to balance and juggle. So yeah, I love following that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of interested, like for you, the things that you write on, what are like the more popular kinds of articles and what gets the most clicks?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure about like the metrics side of things, but
Mm-hmm.
I know from, most of the title reporting that I do is like feature reporting just because we don't have the personnel and the time, and I don't have the bandwidth to take on kind of some of the daily stuff in the title industry space and our coverage with that. But stuff that involves, RESPA and regulatory always is popular because, that's such a big concern. As you said, everyone has a very kind of heightened awareness of it. Cybersecurity stuff, wire fraud, that's
Mm-hmm.
always definitely going to get a lot of attention. And that's definitely something that's not going anywhere. And we've seen kind of the fraudsters reinvent themselves several
Yeah.
times over the past like 18 months, even. So, that's definitely something I always keep my pulse on and I find very interesting as well. And on the real estate side of things, we've been doing a lot of stuff with, or I've been doing a lot of stuff with climate change and how that's impacting real estate agents and the housing market as a whole in terms of like availability of homeowners insurance and rising
Mm-hmm.
costs of flood and fire insurance in like California and Florida. I'm currently working on a story about the building ordinance in Phoenix that is kind of limiting new construction and things like that. Stories that involve that kind of climate change aspect and how some of the trends that we might be seeing in the future are impacting the housing market. I think those are definitely getting a lot of traction right now as well.
Yeah, when you brought up cybersecurity or just security in general, and I noticed that seller fraud seems to be like a hot topic right now. What is that? How does that like differ from other types of fraud that we're used to seeing in the transaction?
Yeah, so I think like the most common or the fraud that I usually think of when I'm thinking about fraud in the title industry is wire fraud,
Mm-hmm.
where, there's business email compromise and fraudulent wiring instructions get sent, and obviously the home buyer is in a rush or whatever, or very excited, and just wires it off to what gets sent, and then they realize that they've, lost their down payment basically. With seller impersonation fraud, it's actually, a pretty creative scam and quite impressive actually. But real estate agents are all looking for transactions right now. It's, purchase transaction volume is way, way down. And so, maybe their guard is down a little bit if they get someone calls up and says, "Hey, I have a property I'd like to sell." With these scams, it's usually, a vacant lot, a vacation home that's not occupied, or even an Airbnb type property. And the fraudulent seller will go to a real estate agent, and nothing will be conducted in person. It'll all be done, over the phone. Sometimes they'll do like Zoom or something like that. They get the real estate agent to list the property. They don't care. One of the big red flags is if they don't care, what the list price is that, or they'll list it really low because they want to get it sold, and they want to get it sold quick. And
Hmm.
so a lot of people say that these sellers are like almost too easy to work with in a way. And so that's something that
Yeah.
pops up to a lot of people. And yeah, they usually the seller, or the fraudulent seller, will also, be able to pose as a notary and get some, what they need notarized to sell the property. The property owner that actually owns the property may not even know that this is going on. They end up selling the property, and the fraudulent seller gets the funds, and off they go.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Is that the same as deed fraud? Because that's something I feel like that we had heard about in the past.
I think it's definitely similar to deed fraud, but there's definitely nuances, and just the bringing it into the real estate agent and actually like listing and selling it. That's the new twist on things.
Yeah, yeah. So is there in that case is there often financing involved too? Like so there's like a lender
No,
involved?
so
No, no.
not usually. They want a cash offer. There may be a lender involved, but they would prefer a cash offer, and that's kind of why they list it low.
And in that case, there's generally probably not a title search happening and any other of the due diligence that might normally happen.
Yeah, exactly. And also, they'll have all the documents they need, and they might have, a fake identification, like a
Hmm.
fake driver's license or something like that as well, that shows, lists their name with the property. And so things will look good on paper. And a lot of these were kind of passing through earlier this year, but they've been getting caught more and more recently, because I think that just people are more aware of this scam happening.
Obviously, anything that you have a lot of money moving through is going to be a target. Like you said earlier, that fraudsters are just getting creative more and more, and finding out different weaknesses in the and there are a lot, unfortunately, in like,
Mhm.
transfer of property. There's just a lot of weaknesses still that, we haven't figured out or haven't, fully been adopted in terms of like better ways and methods of doing things. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm really curious to see like where record keeping and different security measures end up in the next couple of years because it seems like there's got to be a better answer than doing it the way we've
Yes.
always done it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard in the title industry because it is so fragmented with, different counties have different regulations, and some places still not even allowing electronic recording, and some counties still having all their records, on paper in a filing cabinet in the
Yes.
basement
Yep.
versus online. And so there's a lot of hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything, so since you started reporting in 2021, is there anything that kind of like any sort of change or shift or something that popped up that I don't know, that was sort of like a surprising twist of events?
Definitely everything that's gone on with the GSEs, with the AOLs and things like that. When I ended up covering title, everyone was like, "Oh, not a lot happens in the title industry.
It's
Like things
boring or no?
kind of, yeah, things just kind of like go along as they've always have." And, there's not a lot of technology, and it's gonna happen, but it's just there.
Hmm.
And it's kind of just taken off since I've ended up covering title. And I mean, it's been great. I have had so many different stories to cover and different uh, topics and avenues within the industry to look into and dive down. And so that's been a lot of fun. But yeah, the everything with the attorney opinion letters last in spring of 2022, that was definitely caught me off guard, and I think caught the industry off guard a bit as well. And it helped me gain a much better understanding of kind of the history of the title insurance industry and, how it's impacted by outside forces and everything that goes on with the GSEs.
I think it's an interesting story. I think there's a lot of people are not really paying attention to it though. I do think that it's like people don't think there's that it necessarily affects them, and it could have pretty big implications, I think, down the line.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of action by the GSEs in the appraisal space, and I think there's definitely some concern that, title could be next, and that, it's definitely worth paying attention to. And I think one of the biggest hurdles that the title industry has to overcome is a lot of people just don't understand it. And, you probably only buy 5, 6 houses maybe in your lifetime. And I when I started covering title, I was talking to my mom about it. My mom's bought, 4 or 5 houses in her life, and she had no idea that she could have picked whatever title company she wanted. She just went
Hmm.
with whatever her real estate agent suggested, and I mean, it's worked out fine for her, but you do have that option. And, people don't understand that so much of what they pay for with title insurance is that curative action kind of at the beginning, not necessarily, what might happen if there is a claim, because they just see how few claims happen and, don't feel that the cost of the premium is worth it.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been working a lot with Alta and the title, covering the title industry in general, and just gaining a better understanding myself of, what exactly title is, what it does, everything that's happening, and, trying to better articulate that in my coverage and, in the stories that we write for the audience.
And I was just going to ask, do you obviously you guys are in the real estate space and you probably have a lot of real estate professionals that are reading, but do you guys have an audience that's more consumer based too?
Um, Not really. I definitely think there is, obviously some of our housing market coverage and things like that is a bit more consumer facing and more digestible to consumers. I mean, I don't think your average consumer necessarily, you know, cares or has interest in, the second quarter earnings of, a Fidelity or a Remax or something like that. But, I think there are some stories that we definitely cover that are consumer facing, or at least are the issues are consumer facing. And I know a lot of real estate agents and brokers will share some of our coverage with their clients, in newsletters and things like that as well. So, obviously we write with our audience of, title professionals or real estate professionals or mortgage professionals in mind, but with some of these broader reaching topics, you do want to make it accessible to someone who isn't an industry insider.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do people find your work and follow along on what you're covering?
Sure. So all of our coverage currently is over, on the HousingWire website. We've been upping our social media game a little bit, especially on Instagram at HousingWire. Some of our real estate stories as well are cross posted on Real Trends. So those are things that are more real estate agent and brokerage focused, and also stories that involve some of the data that we pull with all of the research and data that we have through the Real Trends side of the company as well.
Well, thank you, Brooklee. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, and I really appreciate what you do. I am a former journalist. I mean, you're never not a journalist, I think, but it's just I no longer am a reporter. But so I have a lot of appreciation for what it is that you do, and covering this space and bringing more light to it. I think in the overall real estate industry, because I do feel like we say a lot, it's a hidden industry, and you're right. Most people don't know what it is outside of real estate at all, so it's really awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a fun industry to dive into. Definitely not an area I thought I would end up in, but I'm very grateful to have ended up and, found the title industry.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
We appreciate Brooklee and our friends at HousingWire. For more information on these stories and more, visit our show notes at proplogics.com/resource/podcasts. Until next time, happy closings.